Hello friends, this is Christian Wiese. Today I wanted to discuss the art of catching yourself. So I had a pretty interesting spiritual experience, even though I hope it's nothing new for you. But for me it felt different. I experienced what you could call the silent witness, the eternal eyes, the Zen art of seeing, or maybe awareness, whatever expression we may have. You probably have come across it, you probably have experienced it. It is as if you are looking through a window pane and you see everything clearly, but there is no seer as such. You're part of the landscape. I have experienced it before, but it always felt like a Satori moment, something where I knew instinctively that it was something a little bit out of the ordinary. Whereas for the first time when I had that, I felt it was just the most normal way of living. And it lasted quite a while. And when you are in that state, you wonder what on earth spiritual teachers talk about and books are about and seminars are about. It's just so easy. But on the other hand then, when you fast forward a little and again your identification with whatever it might be come back, then you find yourself scratching your head a little bit and say, it feels a little different from those eternal eyes. So how do I get my eternal eyes back? Something that I also experienced in those Satori moments, which I feel not many people talk about it, it's a state which is completely non-addictive. You don't resist at all if at one point it fades into something else. It is just life as is. There's no one around to get addicted to, that's how I would put it. And also something which I always, when people talked about it, especially Krishnamurti, when Krishnamurti talked about it, I always thought, how do you sell that to a scientist? Krishnamurti always said that it doesn't make any sense to distinguish between the conscious and the subconscious. And I always, when I heard that, felt, well, you have to be careful with that because you don't know really what the subconscious is. So how can you feel that you have your arms around the subconscious? But it's entirely right, because as you look through those windows, as you observe the screen, and you know that you are seeing the video, but you're not really part of the video, there is kind of nobody around to have a subconscious. So it's very interesting. And so the statement is actually correct. So again, for the first time, I understood what he was talking about. So I tried to delineate all those different experiences, and I came up with the following matrix. If you just take the ordinary self, the self that you and I identify with probably at this present moment, there is the subconscious and there is the conscious, which I would call attention. It is almost like we have a certain vision. It's like we have a spotlight. We either look at the tree, or we look at the car, or we look at the person we talk to. There's a certain attention. That's what the self does. So in the limited mode, it's subconscious. Let's say we get triggered in traffic, and I don't want to react that way, but I cannot help getting angry at the person who cuts in. That's reaction. Whereas the conscious response is, a colleague says something to me, I hear the colleague out because I know the colleague knows what she talks about, and I try to relate it to what my perspective is. and that is kind of a conscious reaction. But it's part of attention. Now, self, limited, expanded, subconscious attention. And then the next level is the I am state, which is a little harder to describe, but I presume if you're listening in, you have had access to that higher dimension of being. And in the more limited version, it's, I think, that awareness, that Zen way of looking at the world. It is limited in the sense that the body-mind world matrix still exists. It's just we don't identify with it. But in the expanded version, which I would call the Satori moment or the Samadhi moment, even that can disappear. So I would call the limited version of the higher dimension awareness and the expanded version super consciousness. Now let me talk about the witness role. I think it's actually very interesting. A friend of mine and I had many discussions on the witness role, and he always said the witness role is all we need. Once we are in tune with the witness, kind of the job is done. And I always say, well, you have to be careful with the witness, because the witness himself might just be a cleverly manufactured spiritual superego. So for example, somebody says something and out comes a second voice that says, well, that's caught in the dualistic world. Well, this is a judgment. Maybe that higher realization, which is something the witness produces, is also caught in that conditioned mind that we try to let go of. But then when I had that experience, I kind of realized maybe just when we say silent witness, that is what my friend wants to emphasize. Because a silent witness, the looking through the window pane experience, is very different. There we would hear the statement, the thought, let's say the thought, and then we would hear the commentary, well, that's not spiritual, that's caught in dualistic. And we just hear it. There is no judgment per se. It just happened at a different dimension of being. We are outside of that. So I would call that the silent witness. So now the question is, what can we do with all of that? Is there actually anything concrete that we can take away from it? Is there a way that we can snap our fingers and become that silent witness? And I don't think so. I don't think we can snap our fingers, but we can snap our fingers in the following way, and that gets me back to the witness role. We can very much observe when we are caught in an identification. We can observe if we are leaning in a certain direction. For example, attention. We can observe if we pay attention to something, and we can spot an agenda. So for me, that is the next level. Level one, a reaction. We do better, everybody does better by being conscious and actually responds to a situation. So there's an element of consciousness. But we can still be aware that there is an attention to something, and we can be with that, just being with the attention. I can't promise you that you break through to the Zen mode of perceiving the world, But I can assure you that with a little detective work, you very much can spot the agenda. So why is it that I'm currently focused on my colleague and not the other person who just entered the room? We can very much be aware of those things, and I think that's the spiritual work we can do. So my argument is, when we really have both feet on the floor, or we completely stay centered and if we're not leaning in any direction, then suddenly we're open to that higher energy that is always present. So the witness role is being aware when we identify with the body, mind, world matrix, and otherwise we just enjoy the higher dimension when it presents itself. The other thing that I took away from that experience is, again, you have heard that before, but reality is here now. If you want to be with that Zen mode of perceiving the world, just deal with the situation that is right in front of you, because you can only find it there. So spot yourself when you talk to somebody, but at the back of your mind you're already thinking about your next project, or when you are in a beautiful surroundings and you are too busy to notice how beautiful the trees look, or the smile of the stranger that you can't notice because you're caught in thoughts. So all the answers, I know that's a cliche, the power of now, but it's true. It's really true. That Zen mode of perceiving the world is only found right in front of you, and it's always found right in front of you. So just look around and catch yourself when you're somewhere else. All right, I hope that was helpful. Until next time, bye.